But let's start with our top story tonight. First day, first show. Amidst the COVID pandemic, Parliament's 18-day-long monsoon session began with all COVID-19 norms in place. From shields to staggered seatings, it's a unique Parliament session. In fact, 25 MPs, we are told, have tested positive now for COVID. But the issue that was at the heart on the first day was the government's reluctance to have question hour. The Modi government is adamant there will be no question hour in Parliament. That's an issue which has angered the opposition, which says the government is running away from critical questions on COVID, on the economy, and on China. That's our top story tonight.
Parliament reconvened on Monday with new rules in view of the coronavirus crisis. Daily 4-hour sittings, special shields for the Speaker and MPs, asking and answering questions from the seats without standing up, and staggered seating arrangement with many MPs sent to visitors' gallery and House chambers. It's a Parliament session like never before, for one more reason. There will be no question hour. The Lok Sabha passed a resolution to drop the question hour, but not before the opposition put up a vehement fight.
So it's a golden hour. Question hour is simply a golden hour of us. But on the excuse of extraordinary situation, आप कहते हैं कि ये क्वेश्चन आवर नहीं होगा. ये ब्रिटिश जमाने से क्वेश्चन आवर की ये क्वेश्चन आवर चलते हैं सदन के अंदर, और आप आजादी की 73 साल बाद आप क्वेश्चन आवर को हटाकर लोकतंत्र की गला घुटने का काम कर रहे हैं.
Various leaders who questioned the suspension of the question hour, sir, all assemblies, including Punjab, West Bengal, and Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, and they have run the session for 2 days or 1 day, and they have passed 20-25 bills. Whereas the government of India, under the leadership of Modi, we decided to run for 18 days and having discussion of all the bills. And in people who are talking, this is the basic structure of the Parliament. In 1975, what had happened, entire country knows, and history is the witness for that, sir.
And the government, however, will be answering unstarred questions by MPs. Among the first ones answered was on migrants' troubles during the lockdown. The government claimed it had no data of migrants' deaths during the shutdown. While the opposition questioned the suspension of question hour, data shows that since 2009, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha could not utilize 90% of the time allotted to oral questions and answers in any session, barring one each in 2016 and 2019.
COVID session will go down in history as an extraordinary one. Parliament data shows that the question hour has been often disrupted by the opposition parties through frequent adjournment motion notices. Perhaps they will now realize its importance. With camera person Pradeep Gupta, this is Anand Patel in New Delhi for India Today.
Now, there are several critical issues that perhaps need to be debated in Parliament. One of those is the situation along the line of actual control between India and China. Listen in today to what Prime Minister Modi and Congress MP Shashi Tharoor had to say on the army amidst the Ladakh standoff.
सदन के सभी सदस्य एक स्वर से, एक भाव से, एक भावना से, एक संकल्प से वो संदेश देंगे सेना के जवानों के पीछे देश खड़ा है. ये बहुत ही मजबूत संदेश भी ये सदन देगा, सभी माननीय सदस्य देंगे.
The government is accountable to Parliament to tell us what's happening. When have they actually reported to us on what's happened, what the talks between the defence ministers, the talks between the foreign ministers, what they've accomplished. The nation needs to know it to be taken into confidence by the government. That's about it. As far as I'm concerned, the question of support for the military is beyond debate. We are very strongly with our army.
Let's raise some big questions tonight. Is the Narendra Modi government running away from questions in Parliament? Will there be debates on China, COVID, economy? Will the monsoon session end up simply as a token session? Is the opposition being gagged, or is this due precaution because of COVID pandemic? Some of the questions that we'll raise in our face-off. I'm joined by the former Union Minister and Congress leader Manish Tiwari, and I'm also joined by GVL Narasimha Rao, BJP spokesperson and MP. We'll also be joined by Kakoli Ghosh Dastidar of the TMC. But I want to come to you, Manish Tiwari, first, because you are among those today who has questioned the propriety and the constitutionality of the government refusing to have question hour. The government says this is a COVID pandemic, it's only a 4-hour session every day, they cannot accommodate question hour. Your views, is the government, according to you, gagging the opposition or simply following COVID precautions?
Well, Rajdeep, I think there is a need to put things in context and in a perspective. There is absolutely no denying the fact that the situation is extraordinary, and any attempt to minimize its implications or its magnitude would be completely imbecile. I think what the Honorable Speaker and the Chairperson of the Rajya Sabha have done is extremely commendable, because to get 800 people to convene, and that too for 18 long days, is a Herculean logistical effort. Having said that, the reason why I objected to the abolition of the question hour, which incidentally the Speaker does have the authority under Rule 32 of the Rules and Procedures of Regulating Conduct of Business in Lok Sabha. But when you read it in juxtaposition with the Colin Shakhdar, especially page 473, Colin Shakhdar says that this is a power which is used only in an extraordinary situation. You cannot deny the fact that this is an extraordinary situation, but then question hour only gets suspended if there is unanimity. So the key word in Colin Shakhdar on page 473 is unanimity in the House with regard to suspending the question hour. And I think that is something which the government either didn't strive to create, and when the opposition asked for a division on that particular issue, unfortunately, the division wasn't granted. My submission is that it is actually just a question of logistics. The thing is that government's logic is that when you answer start questions in Parliament, ministers are assisted by their secretaries and by their other staff. And it would be difficult to allow so many people into Parliament, given the extraordinary situation. It's a valid concern. However, I've been a minister in the government of India also, and I've answered start questions without any reference to any of my officers sitting in the gallery. Suppose if there was a question which a minister found it inconvenient to answer, he could have very well said that, look, this is a question which requires a more detailed answer. I will come back to you with a written response because I'll have to consult my ministry. So I guess, if the logistics of it would have been better managed, given the fact that we have a 4-hour session, could have been extended by half an hour, and start questions could have been accommodated, because let's not forget the fact that the opposition or the right of individual members actually gets reflected in the question hour, in the 0 hour, and the private members' business. The rest of it is government business, and in this particular instance, both private members' business as well as question hour stand suspended.
I allowed Manish Tiwari to have his opening remarks. GVL Narasimha Rao, I want you to respond to that, because at the end of the day, we are supposed to be a parliamentary democracy. And the parliamentary democracy has to have equal space for the opposition and the government. The sense one is getting is the opposition space is constricted, because the government beyond the point does not want inconvenient questions, particularly on the economy and COVID. These are the two subjects which are no-go for this government at the moment in this session. How do you respond to that? You do not want full-fledged debates.
No, Rajdeep, it's a controversy where none exists. It's nothing but a tool of propaganda. The entire opposition and even the media which raises such questions is actually indulging in propaganda. I accuse even the media when they don't really fairly tell the people what the reality is. Punjab Assembly, I think a state which Manish Tiwari ji represents as a member of Lok Sabha, met for 1 day on August 28th, 1 day session. And West Bengal was to meet for 2 days, they met for 1 day. Nowhere in the country any assembly is functioning. The party believes in parliamentary democracy. That's why we have a 18-day long parliament, a parliament session. And a non-stop session at that, without a break, without a Saturday, Sunday. Because we have to, and it's not just questions. There are 23 bills that have been are pending, that have been introduced, that will be taken up for debate in Parliament, and out of which 11 are ordinances. There will be a discussion on all the topics that you mentioned. There is an epidemic diseases ordinance, which will be epidemic diseases amendment bill, which is coming up, which will have 2 to 3 years of time allotted for this. There is a supplementary demands for grants, which will be taken up for at least 2 to 3 hours. Right. Every bill in many state assemblies, bills are being rushed through in a single day. We have commitment for parliamentary democracy, and we are even answering all the questions. Written answers are being supplied.
I'm going to come to those.
You have discussed some of those.
I'm going to come to some of those questions.
No. Therefore, I think it's very unfair of the opposition, unfair of the media to really point out these questions when no controversy exists. Also, look at the record. 60% of the time that was given in Rajya Sabha for question hour in the last 5 years was not even used. It was wasted by the opposition.
Okay,
and then on top of it, now you claim as if it's so sacrosanct and you believe you have such a great faith in this. You don't let this function. In several sessions in the last 5 years, 40% time got wasted. So please understand, the government, as Manish Ji acknowledges, this session is happening at a time when there is, when we are all confronted with a major epidemic challenge. And with all we should really appreciate the fact that we are having nearly a full-fledged session for 18 sittings. And we are all, I think, taking all precautions. We are doing our parliamentary duty. So therefore,
I've given you also, I've given you equal time, sir. I've given you equal time. Both of you have made your preliminary remarks. Let Manish Tiwari respond. Manish Tiwari, is this a storm in a teacup? The government says at the end of the day, extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. In your home state of Punjab, there's been only a 1 day session. Bengal, where the Trinamool Congress is making such a ruckus, there's only been a 1 day session. Why should the fact that the government is not having question hour lead to suggestions that the government is muzzling dissent or is gagging the opposition, as is being alleged?
Rajdeep, for the lack of a better word, this is a very oxymoronic argument which unfortunately the Parliamentary Affairs Minister made on the floor of the Lok Sabha, and my dear friend Mr. GVL Narasimha Rao is repeating. Is Parliament supposed to emulate assemblies, or should it be the other way around? So while he's right that Punjab did have a 1 day session, or West Bengal curtailed its session by 1 day, let me also point out that Telangana had a session with a full-fledged question hour. And so therefore, there would be many other assemblies which also would have had sessions or will have sessions with full-fledged question hours. And this is not an argument which is either here or there. And number two, coming to wastage of time, unfortunately, Mr. GVL Narasimha Rao's memory stops at 2014 and doesn't extend beyond that. Right. If I were to remind him how between 2009 and 2014, session after session of Parliament was watched out by an obdurate opposition, I think possibly it will do them no credit who are trying to be custodians of parliamentary democracy today. As I pointed out, it was a logistical issue.
Yes.
If the government was serious, if the government had intent to answer questions, it is something which could have been very easily managed. As I pointed out,
let me stop you for a moment to get your. Let me get your audio. let me get your audio corrected a bit while we speak. But I want to turn to, therefore, another element. Since we are talking about questions, I have with me, therefore, GVL Narasimha Rao, something that should concern us all. One of the things that happened between the last session that ended in March and now in September was the walk of the migrants that we are playing. Today, one of the MPs asked a question, on an unstarred question, on migrant workers returning to hometowns, and asked whether the government was aware that a number of migrant workers lost their lives during their return to the hometown, whether the government has provided any compensation to the victim's family, whether the government has done any assessment of the job loss to the migrant workers. In each of these things, the government says no such data is maintained. Question does not arise, no such data is maintained. This is the worry. You see, if there was a full-fledged debate, then these issues could be addressed. If you reduce it to an unstarred question where you have a blind one line saying no such data available, what is the message the government is sending? That you don't want to discuss the migrant workers' crisis. You don't want to discuss the crisis of job loss.
No, Rajdeep, the problem is, I think in question hour, you don't have a discussion. In a question hour, you will also get a reply like this, even in a starred question. But there are two supplementaries which are allowed to the member who raises the question. And maybe two other members can ask a question. It's not that you can have a full-fledged discussion. As I said, there are several bills which are lined up in this session, and there will be opportunity to discuss all these issues in those as a part of those bills, and also separate short duration discussions can be had. And as I said, see, it's not the government has not given any data. You're being partial with the truth. Government has said how many. No. First part of the question was how many. What are the number of people who have returned? Some data has been, whatever data is available with the government, which has been compiled from the state, has been made available. You have a, why don't you read it and then tell the truth to the viewers? But where question of number of deaths, it's certainly, there are some incidents that have happened, we know, but how many such incidents happened, where these incidents have happened, certainly this information is likely to be in the domain of the states. I think I find one tendency all of a sudden that everything has to be done by Narendra Modi. Only Modi ji is responsible for anything that happens anywhere in the country because we think it's a soft target. We can really pick and choose this as a target. I think it's every central government has given crores of rupees, thousands of crores of rupees to the people, to the state governments to look after migrants. A lot of money was given under the Disaster Management Act only to look after the migrants, the concerns of the migrants. A lot of money has been given also under the Building and Construction Workers Fund only to look after migrants. Central government does not give money directly to the migrant workers. And also this same question that you refer to talks about how many trains have been arranged, how many people have been transported back to their states. So a lot of information is given. So it will not be, you will be really untruthful if you say nothing is being given through the question hour. Sir, I think that's a very unfair statement.
My limited point is this is an issue that requires an urgent debate. The issue of job loss, the issue of migrant workers, the issue of rehabilitating them. When today you say that these can only be unstarred questions, obviously as an MP, I can't ask counter questions. There can't be a wider debate. Please appreciate what I'm saying.
No,
there are questions whether the government should have kept a data bank of this in the first place.
Rajdeep,
I'm saying this is a time when these issues need to be put before the people of the country. Forget questions. You can have a debate on this.
72 hours. No, we are going to work for 72 hours. What are we going to debate? We are not going to debate issues which are not important before the country. In 72 hours, if the opposition lets it function, which I hope they will, and certainly you will have ample time to discuss all these issues.
I'll get let me get Manish Tiwari also on this, but before that, I have also been joined at this moment by Kakoli Ghosh Dastidar of the Trinamool Congress.
May I just come and
please go ahead. Please go ahead, Manish. Please go ahead.
I was listening to my friend Mr. GVL Narasimha Rao, and I was getting a little amused when he says that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is being used as a punching bag. Last I recall, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is still the Prime Minister of India. And in a parliamentary democracy, the buck stops with the Prime Minister. So therefore, if there are challenges facing this country with regard to the border situation with China, with regard to the mismanagement of COVID, with regard to the state of the economy, the Prime Minister obviously is responsible, his government is responsible, and he and his ministers are accountable to Parliament. And number two, on a wider note, let me just add, once I had asked a question in Parliament that do you get better replies out of a right to information process than the information provided to Parliament? And the reason why I asked that question, Rajdeep, is because the information provided through the unstarred process is so tardy, and there is absolutely complete non-application of mine that if you ask the same question in a right to information process and the same question through the unstarred process, you will get a better answer in the right to information process.
That's exactly the response I wanted from you, GVL. Here is the Minister of Labour and Employment being asked in the country whether the government has provided any compensation to the victims' families, whether the government is aware of the number of migrant workers who have lost their lives during the return of hometown, and many NGOs have been compiling these lists, I can tell you, whether the government has done any assessment of the job loss. What does the government say? No such data is mentioned. Question does not arise. No such data. Should the government of this country not tell the country? Are these not issues that need much more than a staccato one line? When migrants have lost their lives, is that what you're saying? That's my problem.
No,
What's the point in having staccato one line?
That's not your problem. Your problem is you want to attack the central government.
No,
you want to attack. You want to. No. You don't want to have a fair. You don't want to make a fair comment.
You don't think the country needs to know about migrant workers and job losses, sir?
Tiwari, are we answerable for everything? Health is a state subject. Implementation has to be done by the states. Migrants have to be dealt with by the states. So do you think they have no responsibility? You want to target only the central government? You want to use it as a punching bag? You're right, you're using it. This government has done what we have done. Have you ever mentioned? We have increased the Manrega allocations by 40,000 crores.
Yes.
We have launched the Prime Minister Garib Kalyan Abhiyan. We are covering 116 districts where more than 50 lakh mandates are being generated every day. The government is doing without any concern. I think, come on. I think you can't run away. The media cannot blind itself to asking questions to Mamata Banerjee. Media cannot blind itself to asking questions to Amrinder Singh. You see, central government cannot answer if the Mamata Banerjee government is insensitive. If they do not allow special trains for migrants, how do you blame the central government?
Let me play those images, because those images, okay, you made your point. You're saying you're making the center a punching bag. It's a blind eye. Kakoli Ghosh Dastidar, respond to what you're hearing. The government is saying, look, particularly on the migrant issue, for example, where the answer today has been given saying no such data is maintained. They say this data should be maintained by the states. Earlier, before you joined us, GVL Narasimha Rao said it's all very well to blame the center for gagging the opposition. In Bengal, how many days did you have a session? Just for 1 day. 1 day session, Kakoli Ghosh Dastidar, the TMC had in Bengal. Who are you to take the moral high ground and target the Modi government?
He should be quite aware of the parliamentary system of proceedings. The Bengal session is a special session. This is a regular monsoon session. And in a regular session, the opposition has every right to question the government, to point out the follies, and
you haven't had a monsoon session in Bengal, ma'am. You haven't had a regular monsoon session in Parliament. If I am a Bengali... Ma'am, if I'm a citizen in Bengal, my question...
The demand for the state of affairs in the country and the falling economy of the country, the rising potato prices, the curtailment of the question hour, and also curtailment of individual time of the opposition and the government side members. They are impinging on the democratic right of the members. So
ma'am, you're saying, ma'am, Kakoli Ghosh Dastidar, what you're saying about Delhi could be also held true of Calcutta.
Attention of media from this. They are trying to bring up topics which are irrelevant.
Okay, let me for a moment move on to Manish Tiwari. Yes, Mr. Tiwari, you wanted to make a point, because according to GVL Narasimha Rao, whether I raise this issue of why migrant workers' data is not provided, or whether I raise the issue of a truncated questionnaire, he says this is making the government a punching bag, that the government of the day is being held responsible for whatever has gone wrong in the last 6 months, and the government cannot be, center alone cannot be held responsible. Questions should be asked to state governments on issues like migrants.
Rajdeep, unfortunately, my friend Mr. GVL Narasimha seems to have run out of arguments, and that's why he's frothing at the mouth. If the NDA BJP government had so much of faith in federalism, the first thing that the Prime Minister would not have done is announced a nationwide lockdown without consulting the states at a 4-day notice. Let us go back to what the Prime Minister said. He says the Mahabharat war was won in 18 days. The war against COVID will be won in 21 days. But when they realized...
No, he said, sir, let me be fair to Prime Minister Modi. He said, we hope to win this war in 21 days.
Well, all right, fine. Hope I stand corrected. But when they realized that this entire lockdown is proving to be a complete failure, you had epidemiologists who morphed into economists and economists who morphed into epidemiologists. You know, latter could not flatten the curve, but the former flattened the economy. Then a very clever attempt was made to shift the blame onto the states. But the fact is that the government of India did nothing from the 30th of January till the 23rd of March, 30th of January 2020, when the first case was discovered in India, and the 23rd of March, when the Janata curfew was put in place. And Rajdeep, remember, when the Janata curfew was put in place, there were 381 cases in India with 7 deaths. There are over 45 lakh cases today, and many thousand people have died. Who is responsible for that? Is it not the responsibility of the opposition to hold the government accountable? If they want to hold the state governments accountable, yes, where they are in opposition or where they have a presence, they should hold those governments also accountable. But that does not in any case mitigate their responsibility or mitigate the responsibility of the opposition in order to hold the government of India responsible.
Okay, before I come to you, GVL, GVL, I will let you respond. GVL, I will let you respond. I am first playing out what the Prime Minister said on the COVID question. Let's listen into the Prime Minister and then you can respond. This is what the Prime Minister said today on the COVID question. Listen in.
कोरोना से बनी जो परिस्थिति है उसमें जिन सतर्कताओं के विषय में सूचित किया गया है उन सतर्कताओं का पालन हम सबको करना ही करना है और ये भी साफ है जब तक दवाई नहीं तब तक कोई ढिलाई नहीं। हम चाहें कि बहुत ही जल्द से जल्द दुनिया के किसी भी कोने से वैक्सीन उपलब्ध हो, हमारे वैज्ञानिक जल्द से जल्द सफल हो और दुनिया में हर किसी को इस संकट में से बाहर निकालने में हम कामयाब हो।
GVL, now respond. You see, the Prime Minister says until we have a vaccine, the situation will remain tough, and one appreciates that. But the fact is, therefore, the concerns that people have, some of which Manish Tiwari just raised, about the rising number of cases, and we'll have a story soon about the fact hospitals are running out of oxygen. Are these not questions that our members of parliament should be addressing? If I'm a taxpayer, why should I pay for you going to parliament if you're not going to take up these issues of critical concern and be transparent about them instead of just giving me these one-line answers that the Ministry of Labour and Employment today gave on job losses and on migrants who returned home, sir?
Rajdeep, I think you are repeating that point, which is very irrelevant, because always replies are given in this form only.
That's my problem.
Even the verbal answers will not be more than 2 to 3 minutes. Don't expect a 20-minute reply to any start question. On a given day, there are 20
full-fledged debate.
20 questions. There will be a full-fledged debate.
Why should there not be a full-fledged one-day debate?
Let me make this statement.
Yes.
We have done exceptionally well. The lockdown saved millions of lives in this country. Otherwise, the Congress was celebrating the Johns Hopkins predictions.
It's also destroyed the economy.
Can I complete?
It's also destroyed the economy, but go ahead.
No, I will answer all your questions. Crores of people would be infected. The more than 30 crore people were estimated to get infected in the month of May. We have certainly saved millions of lives. And we have said the Prime Minister has taken all the state governments along, but the work at the last delivery has to be done at the state level. And the central government has provided complete support. And we were not self-sufficient in any of these medical supplies. But look at the manner in which we became self-sufficient. So certainly the state governments have done their job. But wherever there are limitations, they will also be highlighted. And if the central government has certainly some areas where it needs to improve, it is willing to accept those suggestions. But you cannot say that central government, then we should have dismissed all your governments. Why the hell are you in government?
No.
Health is a state subject. If you don't want to be in government, then you tell us. Let the central government implement the entire thing. Mamata Banerjee need not be the chief minister.
Let me get both Manish Tiwari and Kakoli on this. Kakoli, why don't you take this? That at the end of the day, is there a responsibility for state governments or not? Particularly when it comes to the COVID fight. Today you are saying in Parliament you want to target the centre. Will the state have any responsibility, Ms. Ghosh Dastidar?
Most of the states have done exemplary well. As far as my state is concerned, you can see that the daily count is not going above 3,000 even when the whole country is reeling under the number of cases. It is nearly reaching 1 lakh a day. It is the highest in the whole of the world. We are quite ashamed of it that this government, the central government, has totally failed to protect the people of the nation. Thali baja ke aur tali baja ke corona rukta nahi hai. They should realize. They should have consulted the doctors and specialists right at the beginning. And the lockdown should have been much more well planned than what they did now. But the question that the opposition would ask, as far as the economy is concerned, the failing economy, the division of the GST percentage to the states, and also to maintain the federalism of consulting to the states or allowing the opposition.
You know, the fact is that all of you are targeting the government. Manish Tiwari, let me give you a final word here. Is this parliament session simply a token parliament session? 18 days, 4 hours a day. Is this, and that too after 6 months, should we treat it as extraordinary times, and therefore, as can happen in extraordinary times, the government of the day is saying, look, this is all we can do. We can't have a regular parliament session where you could have raised all these issues as you would otherwise do.
Rajdeep, the opposition has agreed to all the demands which have been made by the government with regard to their legislative business, which is namely getting the 11 ordinances that they promulgated, discussed in Parliament, and eventually, if Parliament agrees, passed. The opposition has only 3 demands. Number 1, a full-fledged discussion on the border situation, China. Number 2, a full-fledged discussion with regard to the management of COVID, because unfortunately, between 23rd of March and now, you have run the COVID fight through notifications by the Ministry of Home Affairs issued under the NDMA Act. And number 3, a discussion on the state of the economy. I think these are the 3 things which are most critical. And if the government runs away from these 3 discussions, then indeed it will be a token session of Parliament.
Very quickly, GVL, will you run away from these 3 issues? Do you not want, will you answer why is the economy contracted by 23%? Will you answer why we are now adding 1 lakh cases a day? Will you answer why the border situation with China has flared up? Are these 3 issues on which you are ready to have an open, full, transparent debate?
The only one who has run away from Parliament is Rahul Gandhi, and for whatever reasons or excuses that he might make. And he wants to be active only on Twitter. And I would be very happy to see the opposition being active in Parliament and not confined to Twitter. There will be enough discussion in 72 hours. I'm sure there will be a number of occasions when we can debate all these topics. There is a statement there is a debate on Economic Decisions Act. There is a bill on homeopathy. There is supplementary demands for grants.
Homeopathy. I am asking you 3 full-fledged debates where the Prime Minister will sit and attend and answer questions. Is that possible or not?
No. I think the Prime Minister will attend when he thinks it's important for him to attend. And the opposition should answer why Rahul Gandhi has run away from Parliament at a time when he was very active. Has he run away to avoid questions, to avoid being asked, being made accountable for issues like China? why they signed an agreement in 2008.
Who's in government at the moment? Is Rahul Gandhi in government or Narendra Modi in government? Who's in government?
But he's the leader of the opposition. So he's an important leader. They may have another person as a leader of the opposition, but the real power center in the Congress is Rahul Gandhi and
you want
Sonia
to answer
Gandhi.
that in 30 seconds?
Both of them are away. Rahul Gandhi has run away.
You want to answer that at the end? The fact is, Rahul Gandhi, your leader, your face is not in parliament at the moment. So while you can attack the Prime Minister, what about your leader?
I'm not mentioning Sonia ji. Maybe she has other reasons. But why is Rahul Gandhi absent?
Okay.
Rajdeep,
yes.
Rajdeep, I think after 1962, this is perhaps the most serious parliament session or the most serious situation which the country confronts. And so therefore, we are actually facing a forefront situation as I currently speak. You have the China-Pakistan axis, you have the COVID situation, you have a collapsed economy, and you may have the resurgence of left-wing extremism because of the deteriorating relations with Nepal and Nepal's relationship with China.
Rahul Gandhi,
so therefore,
sir,
India has never ever been so vulnerable.
This is the moment for Rahul Gandhi to put the government on the map.
Let us not try and minimize the gravity of the situation, and let us not tilt at windmills. I do hope that given the situation, the Prime Minister will not only direct his parliamentary affairs minister to proceed to these three discussions, but also attend these three discussions and give it the time.
Will Rahul Gandhi attend? Will Rahul Gandhi also attend, Mr. Tiwari?
Sorry, come back.
Will Rahul Gandhi also attend or not? It's one thing to say Prime Minister must answer. Will Rahul Gandhi attend and ask the questions?
Well, Mr. Gandhi, has travelled with the Congress president. I think he would be back, and he would definitely attend Parliament.
Okay.
At times, you have a situation whereby you are compelled to take certain decisions. I do not think that the decision to miss Parliament was really voluntary by any circumstances. But as I earlier said, this is not about individuals. This is about India. And India has never been as vulnerable as it is today.
Let's leave it there. GVL Narasimha Rao, Kakoli Ghosh Dastidar, Manish Tiwari for joining us on our big political debate this evening on the first show of Parliament. I wish we could have more debates like this in Parliament rather than in TV studios. Thank you all very much for joining me here on the news today. Let's take a break. Up next, as corona cases cross 48 lakhs, this is the latest crisis. There's a sudden shortage of medical oxygen that has hit several hospitals across the country. You're watching the news today. News without the noise. The real issues, real people. Back in a moment. Welcome back. Let's give you the overall India picture of what's happening on the COVID front. Total cases now creeping towards the 50 lakh mark, 48 lakhs, 46,427. Deaths, 79,722. Recovery rate, 77.9%. Mortality rate is 1.6%. Now, while that might seem low, it still means a number of people are dying. Last 24 hours, total cases, 92,071. Deaths, 1,136. At the moment. Now, at a time when this corona caseload in the country is rising exponentially, especially in states like Maharashtra, a sudden shortage of medical oxygen has hit several states. In Maharashtra, despite the government's efforts to streamline oxygen supply, the fact is many hospitals, both private and government, especially in towns outside Mumbai, are now claiming of a huge crisis of oxygen. Let's take a look at our Get Real India story.
Maharashtra, the state worst hit by the coronavirus pandemic, crossed the 1 million mark last week. And as cases increase, so do the number of patients needing oxygen support.
Since last 2 to 3 weeks, we are drastically shortage of having oxygen cylinders.
The gas agency supplying oxygen to this particular private hospital too expressed its helplessness.
But the picture at government hospital is something different. The government hospitals are saying that they have appropriate number of oxygen cylinders and there is no shortage.
This is the situation in Pune. But it is no better in other parts of the state. Doctors at private hospitals in other districts are also facing a shortage of supply.
Now the number of patients is so much increasing that I don't know, there's a lot of difference between supply and demand. And if it is so, then we are all helpless.
At present, Maharashtra requires about 1,200 metric tons of medical oxygen daily, while units in the state have a total capacity to produce 1,210 metric ton oxygen every day, out of which 40% was being diverted for industrial use and only 60% was available for medical purposes. But with the situation deteriorating, the government has instructed suppliers to prioritize. The state government has taken a crucial decision to reserve 80% supply for hospitals and only 20% for industries. Among hospitals too, first priority would be given to government hospitals, then private COVID hospitals, and then oxygen would go to non-COVID hospitals. Since Maharashtra is facing a shortage, the state government has also issued a notification to oxygen suppliers to sell not more than 20% of their cylinders outside the state. The move, aimed at stabilizing the state's own oxygen requirement, affected Madhya Pradesh, that largely depends on Maharashtra and Gujarat for oxygen supply.
लेकिन हमने वैकल्पिक व्यवस्था भी की है। प्रारंभ में मध्य प्रदेश में ऑक्सीजन की उपलब्धता थी केवल 50 टन, अभी बढ़ा के हमने 120 टन कर ली है और 30 सितंबर तक हम 150 टन ऑक्सीजन की व्यवस्था कर लेंगे।
In Gujarat too, following the severe shortage of oxygen, the state government issued a notification to regularize its supply and circulation. But for now, the oxygen situation still remains precarious, not only in Maharashtra, Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh, but in many parts of the country.
The Maha-oxygen crisis facing the country at the moment. Dr. Shashank Joshi, member of Maharashtra's COVID task force, is with us. Dr. Joshi, Maharashtra, the state where cases have now crossed 1 million. Major concern, huge shortage of oxygen. Several districts now reporting a serious shortage. Was this something that could not have been anticipated? Was the government unable to resolve? Why is the government unable to resolve this issue of oxygen shortage? Sorry, we are having some problem with your audio. Let me try, Dr. Joshi. You know, the fact is that the government, should have anticipated what was happening. Every day around 2,000 to 3,000 new patients require oxygen support across Maharashtra. The critical ones require 40 to 60 liters of oxygen a minute. Clearly, somewhere someone has not planned enough, sir. I want to come to my good news today story, because away from all the bad news that we keep getting, here's a good news today story. This one comes from the valley, where Pulwama's pencil manufacturers are dominating the market, providing increasing employment opportunity in difficult times. Remember, Pulwama has been in the news often for the wrong reasons. Here's a story that puts Pulwama in the good news category. Take a look.
Many of you know Pulwama in South Kashmir as a hotbed of militancy. But there is more to this place. For instance, pencils. More than 70% of the slats used in making pencils across the country come from this district. Pulwama, in that sense, is India's pencil district.
एक्चुअली यहाँ पे पहले 96 से उससे पहले ये मतलब चाइना जर्मनी वहाँ से वुड लाते थे अपनी एक कंपनी जम्मू में वहाँ वो लेते थे फिर उन्होंने क्या किया फिर वो उनने यहाँ पे थोड़ा देख लिया फिर उन्होंने पूरा राउंड ही लेना वुड ले यहाँ पे कटिंग करके वुड ही ले लिया फिर वो हमने सप्लाई किया 2 साल एंडिंग 2013 में फिर उन्होंने इस तरह का हमें ये दे दिया कि भैया जो हम यहाँ करते हैं इसको वहाँ ही करके दे दो फिर मंगाई मशीनें तो हमने कर दिया ये शुरू मगर मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा मैं इसलिए खुश हूँ रोजगार मिल रहा है इसमें लोगों को
इस इंडस्ट्री को बढ़ावा देने के लिए बेसिकली गवर्नमेंट काफ़ी इनिशिएटिव्स लाने की कोशिश कर रही है और आगे काफ़ी उसमें सक्सेसफुल भी रही है अभी रिसेंटली एक इनिशिएटिव हुआ था कि इस डिस्ट्रिक्ट को पुलवामा डिस्ट्रिक्ट को पेंसिल डिस्ट्रिक्ट के नाम से जाना जाए और बहुत जल्दी ये होने वाला है
Preparing slats is like a cottage industry here. People use wood from poplar tree that grow only in the wetlands of Pulwama. The locals say this wood has the right amount of moisture for making pencils.
There is a renewed hope for a lot of locals who are taking a keen interest in these pencil making units. Shujaul Haq, Inside Nagar for India Today.
Let's leave you with our image tonight, and our image comes from the US Open final where Dominic Thiem created history by becoming the first player in the Open era at the US Open to come back from 2 sets down to claim his maiden Grand Slam title, defeating Alexander Zverev. 5-set thriller that went on till the early hours of the morning. The duo shared a unique handshake on the completion of the match because, remember, we live in COVID times. In a moment, I'm back with the other big story. The Delhi riots charge sheet. Is the government engaging in a witch hunt or are the left activists responsible for the violence? Back in a moment. News without the noise. Thanks for watching. Real issues, real people.
Hi everyone, Preeti Chaudhary here. Hope you like this video. For latest news and analysis, like and subscribe to the India Today YouTube channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated. Thank you for watching.